I want to bring in thehill.com's Niall Stanage as well. You know, the president's schedule, a lot happening over these 5-6 days, but certainly the most anticipated event has to be his meeting with China's Xi Jinping to come. Paint the stakes for us, Niall. What will you be watching most closely here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That meeting with Xi is the big event on this trip. It's all very well to have the kind of ceremonial pomp that we see on our screens right now, but it's the meeting with Xi that will really matter. That is certainly the most important American trading relationship in terms of Asia. It's one where the context is an increasingly confident and assertive China. The most recent escalation of those trade tensions came from the Chinese, actually, where they imposed new export controls on some rare earth minerals, which are particularly important for the tech industry. So I think that the really substantive question on this trip will be whether President Trump and Xi Jinping do manage to ease those tensions or not, and how markets back here in the US will react if they don't. We shall see how that goes, but that's where the real meat of this trip exists.
Yeah, and to your point, we are seeing the pomp and the circumstance that usually unfolds here with a visit such as this on the ground in Malaysia right now. Returning to what is to come with Xi Jinping, I mean, Niall, is there any chance that this meeting does not happen or does not go the way that Trump is confidently projecting he believes it will, given the recent tensions, the tariff threats? We understand 130% tariffs threatened by President Trump on Chinese exports.
Yeah, I think there is some risk here, Natasha, for sure. Now, on the biggest picture part of this, it is in both nations' interests to have fairly smooth trade, to not have massive tariffs on each other. That's certainly in the mutual interest of the United States and China. But as I mentioned, the Chinese have become more willing to flex their muscle in these kinds of negotiations. I mentioned the rare earths issue. It is true that China is still an export economy. It's very important that its exports get to the United States from the Chinese point of view. Similarly, there are obviously massive American companies with massive interests in China, and they don't want barriers to their participation being made even higher. So there are interests in smoothing all of this out, but there are risks that it goes off the rails, particularly when you have the increasingly assertive Chinese and President Trump, who obviously takes a very dim view of any attempt to, as he would see it, intimidate him, and always likes to be the person ratcheting up the tensions or willing to go to a pitch that his adversary or opponent in the negotiation is not.
Yeah, and Niall, on your screen, as we're talking right now, you saw the music, the dancing on the right there. Trump was doing his classic two-fisted shimmy shuffle that he is known for. I want to bring Libbey Dean back in as well, because notably not on the schedule, Libbey, no meeting with Kim Jong-un coming up, no meeting with Vladimir Putin. Tell me more about that. What do we know about that?
Yeah, those are two key things that aren't taking place. Of course, that meeting with Russia's President Vladimir Putin entirely separate from this entire trip. But that meeting with Kim Jong-un is something that we've been asking the White House throughout the week if there was the potential of that happening. And I think you asked a great question, Natasha, on the potential of this meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, on the potential of that not happening. This was something that President Trump has gone back and forth about, even at one point saying he was going to call off this meeting as we saw those trade tensions escalate between the U.S. and China. So that is going to be the incredibly high-stakes thing that we see play out in this whole entire trip. But there's a lot happening. It's not just this meeting with Xi Jinping. Right when President Trump he's going to hit the ground running here. He's doing this arrival ceremony that we're seeing all the pomp and circumstance. But then he's headed to this summit. And before he even gets to that summit, now they've flip-flopped the schedule where he's going to watch the peace treaty be signed off between Cambodia and Thailand. Also, the country's leader can get back there for a funeral that they're anticipating after the death of the Queen. So quite a few schedule changes, but the thing that remains off the schedule, as you mentioned there, Natasha, is that meeting with Kim Jong-un. That would be incredibly noteworthy. The last time they met face-to-face, it was that very high-profile meeting back in 2019. That was the last time that President Trump was also in the region. So the first time President Trump has returned to the region since 2019 is what you're looking at on your screen, Natasha.
Yeah, I appreciate that context. And Niall, back over to you here. The president has also talked about using this meeting with Xi to discuss Ukraine. Tell me more about China's relationship with Russia and how that factors into that can of worms and conversation.
Yeah, I mean, what President Trump is talking about there is trying to lean on China to further isolate Russia in various ways. Now, to be clear, China has not, obviously, it's not participating in the war directly, but it is essentially more aligned with Russia, certainly, than with the Ukrainians, for example. And so, in terms of the broader Western effort to isolate Russia economically with sanctions, with the threat of penalties upon other nations that, for example, buy Russian oil. That's something that China stands very much apart from and is certainly viewed as both much more sympathetic to the Russians and as a key element of de facto support for Russia. So if President Trump could somehow persuade the Chinese to shift from that stance, that could change the underlying dynamics in that conflict.
Yeah, certainly.
And
Niall, I want to say, you know, as he
reluctant to change in that.
Yeah, and don't mean to interrupt here, but as he gets into this car and we're wrapping up here, why should Americans care about this 5-6 day visit? Why should they be watching this so closely? How does it affect the average American at home, Niall?
Well, I think that basically for economic reasons, if there is an increase in trade tensions with China, that could impact not only the American stock market, but could lead to inflationary pressures. You know, most of us have something that's manufactured in China in our cupboards or closets. And so if tariffs suddenly swung way upwards, that would have a negative effect. It would also hit American stock markets very badly. I think that element, the China element, is frankly more important than some of these business deals that the president is perhaps going to announce during this leg of the Malaysia trip. Those things are, I mean, it's good to have trade deals, but they're not going to fundamentally change the shape of the American economy.
Okay, appreciate you both, Libbey Dean, Niall Stanage. We know.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.